Hello, welcome. I'm Yves Labeeu. I'm working for Attentia, and Attentia is mainly active in two domains, HR and well-being. I am working for Attentia Legal Partners, where I'm busy with salary optimization, bonus optimization, and also flexible rewards. The subject of today is remote working, or to be more precise, home office. And if we want to put it in a legal correct way, it is in fact telework. And what we will see today is what is the impact of telework on your compensation and benefits, and also on your payroll. Now, let me begin with a question. And I admit it is maybe a rather rhetorical question. Namely, is working at home here to stay? And I'm sure you already gave it a thought, and maybe more than one. And of course, telework is not new. Even before March, even before the horrible C word, some of us already worked at home. Certain functions did it more. Think about sales, about executive people. They were indeed already working at home, but they did this in a more occasional way and not a structural way. Which brings us to a first distinction, and that is a legal distinction. Occasional work is less regulated, whereas structural work is more regulated. Occasional work, the word says it, is incidental. It is not regularly. In fact, it is not to be foreseen on beforehand. To give an example, it could be that you can use a couple of hours at home or a whole day at home, for instance, because your child is sick, because the plumber is coming over, or a technician is coming over. So that already happens today. Structural work, telework, as we said, is more structured. And we will see later on that we have to comply with a specific collective labor agreement, namely the 85. Now, we do speak with many HR people, and we interrogate them about what people are thinking about telework. And in fact, it's a bit a mixed image, in the sense that, on the one hand, people are a bit bored of working at home, and they do miss their colleagues, or some of them. On the other hand, they did experience the benefits of working at home, such as avoiding traffic jams and perhaps less stress, being able to start earlier in the morning, and certainly also being able to be more focused, more concentrated. So we already did see telework, and now our answer on this question, and it is already busy, is that we are going to a situation where at least partly, if not entirely, at least partly, home office work is here to stay. Which brings us to an important thing, namely drawing or redrawing your telework policies. Not only for the legal part, as we will see later on, of course also for the organizational part, and let's not forget well-being, which is more and more important. That should also be considered when drawing up your telework policies. A first theme I want to develop is from commuting allowance to telework allowance. It is a tendency we do see among our customers. In fact, today we have a certain budget for commuting allowance. By commuting, I mean the traffic between home and a fixed place of work. So now there is a budget for a commuting allowance, in Dutch vergoeding woon-werkverkeer, in French indemnité domicile-travail. Well, what we do see is that some firms are already busy with it. Other firms have the intention to do it. As there will be more homework than in the past, wholly or partly, we see a tendency to transfer the commuting budget into telework allowances. Today, in order to enable the employees to do the commuting traffic, firms are putting at disposal a company car, a company bike. They're also granting, paying commuting allowances. And as you might know, this is very interesting, since commuting allowances know two exemptions. First, there is a social security exemption, meaning that there is no reason to pay employer social security and employee social security. Two, there is a second exemption, a tax exemption. But that exemption is depending from the way you are trafficking. In fact, in case of public transport, there is 100% full tax exemption. In case of private traffic, then there is also an exemption, but then it is limited. It is limited on a yearly basis up to 410 euros, amount which is indexated almost each year. That's on a yearly basis. If you see this on a monthly basis, then the maximum to be tax-free is 34.20 euro. So today it exists, and it is in fact interesting, but let's not forget why it is exonerated, why it is exempted. Well, that is because you actually are doing commuting. And nowadays, what we do see is that we do less commuting, of almost not or almost no commuting, meaning that in a case of inspection, the whole exemption of Social Security, of withholding tax, could be modified during an exemption and could be treated as a salary, meaning there would be Social Security contributions as well employer as employee. There would be withholding tax. Result, the employee has less net amount in his pocket, but he is expecting this certain net amount, so it's rather predictable that he will come to the employer and ask to get the same net in another way, which would lead to a upgrossing in salary. Of course, you understand this would be much more expensive for the employer. So I think there are good reasons, at least for considering the shift, the transfer from commuting budget into telework allowances. But in doing so, there are 3 points of attention. The first point of attention, and the question you have to put yourself is, well, am I, as an employer, am I legally deemed, am I obliged to grant these commuting allowances? Am I obliged to grant these commuting allowances? From which is that depending? Well, it could depend from an interprofessional collective labor agreement, interprofessional, so valid for all the sectors, but very often it will not be regulated interprofessionally. Very often the reason why employers are obliged to pay commuting allowances is in fact contained into a sectoral commuting allowance. And sometimes we also see commuting allowances on a firm base, allowances which depend from the distance from home to work. So before modifying it, if you're able to modify it, you should be aware on what is the commuting allowance payment based. That was the first point of attention. The second point of attention, we already said it in the beginning, there was a difference between occasional work and structural work. Structural work is more regulated, and it is regulated by a very specific numbered CLA, CAO, CCT, the CLA number 85. The CLA 85 contains a lot of rules as to the conditions in which you can organize the telework. Also, conditions about what about the reachability of your employee working at home? Which means of work, which in fact material, which office material are you going to put at disposal? And last but not least, how are you going to reimburse the employee for office costs he or she had done in order to be able to work at home in a proper way? The third point of attention is, in fact, avoid dual use of costs reimbursements. It is very likely that today you already reimburse professional costs. In Dutch, we call it kosten eigen aan de werkgever. In French, we call it frais propres à l'employeur, so a reimbursement of professional costs. It often already exists before CLA 85. And in an ideal way, it is based on a description. It is based on a detail where you say, well, these reimbursements are for instance, visiting clients or office costs or secondary car costs, representations cost, daily allowance. So ideally, it is described. But what we sometimes see is that the employer is granting a general, a forfeitary, a lump sum amount per month without it being specified. Well, it could be that it is not specified, but that one of the reasons for granting this is maybe costs for a home office. And that could lead to dual use, in the sense that you already reimburse partly for office costs, and if you foresee something, reimbursement of costs due to a compliance with the CLA 85, then you would pay it twice. And of course, you understand that in case of inspection, that would be, in fact, a problem. Now, if you want to organize a reimbursement of the commuting allowance, in fact, you want to more correctly go from commuting allowance to telework allowance, you should make a certain exercise. In fact, one of the things you should begin with is an inventory. You should see, based, for instance, on the postcodes, where are my employees living, distance work to home. Where are they living? By which means, by which transport are they doing this commuting? How frequently are they doing it? First, we have to have the facts. And upon these facts, we can then see what do we spend on the commuting allowances, and we can show this, and then we see which is the budget that can be allocated from commuting to telework. In fact, there are very much parameters to be used here. I didn't show them here in order not to go too many into details, but these details are what is the frequency, what is the transport means, what is the cost, on what is it based. And so we can in fact see what is the margin in order to do this shift entirely or often partly. So that was the first subject. The second subject we do see is in fact introducing home office teams in a flex reward plan. As you probably know, a flex reward plan, cafetaria plan, plan cafetaria, a flex reward plan is in fact a plan where the employer is granting the possibility, so not the obligation, the possibility to give some choices to the employees, to make choices amongst a variety of teams. And these choices can be made in a budget-neutral way. In fact, in a flex reward plan, you will always have a budget, which we name and which is in fact constituted by funding elements. And with this budget, you have the ability to make some choices in spending elements. And what we often see is that one of the budgets used and often used is the gross salary. Could also be a bonus. And in some sectors, it also can be a end-of-year premium of even downsizing your car. And if you have this budget, you can spend it, for instance, on mobility, on development, on health, on work-life balance, on multimedia. A new team now, which we are introducing in our customers, is the team of home office. Since we do shift from commuting allowance to telework, it could be a very good idea to introduce home office into your flex reward plan. I will just give a few examples. You could put at disposal a desk or a chair, an ergonomic chair. Maybe a bigger screen, because laptops at home, it's a small screen, and maybe at the office you had a bigger screen. Or a second screen. Could also put at disposal a printer scanner, even, and that would have come handy in July and in August, even putting at disposal a mobile air conditioning unit. And of course, an attractive one also, and less known, is the reimbursement of the cost of utilities. Utilities being electricity or heating. So, I hope I have given you some food for thought, and maybe we will hear each other later during the Q&A session. Thanks for attending and have a nice day.